Let's say you're behind in your taxes. I have clients who hadn't done their taxes for 3 years. Some horrible stack of files sitting in their office that they're so terrified of that they won't even go in their office. You know, it's like that rot and catastrophe of abandoned responsibility has turned into a monster of such magnitude they won't even enter the room. And if they do enter the room, the last thing they'll do is look at the desk where the file is lurking. And you can see in your own house, if you pay attention, you walk through your house, you'll see there are things you don't want to look at. And I would say those are things you should look at. You know, one of them might be your wife. So, hey, that happens a lot. I knew a man who had been abused as a kid, and he didn't look at himself in the mirror for 40 years. Yeah. I taught him to look in the mirror again. And in his dreams, he was still 7 years old, which was the age he was abused at. And as he looked in the mirror, he practiced looking at himself in the mirror for 5 minutes a day before he went to bed. And as he looked in the mirror, his dream self aged until it was the age he was at now. He was so humiliated by what had happened to him that he couldn't face himself. And he knew so little of himself because of that he hadn't updated his self-representation and imagination for 43 years. Oh. Well, you can walk through your house and you can see what you don't want to look at. And you should look at those things. And then, if they're too frightening, you should look at little bits of them. So one of the things I would say with someone who is faced with this tax problem is like, how long have you been avoiding your taxes? 2 years. Well, so you're pretty afraid of them. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty afraid of them. It's like, okay, well, this week, here's what you have to do. Go into your office and just open the file that's on the top and just look at the first page. Just look at it. Don't do anything else. And don't violate the contract you've established with yourself. Because you might be embarrassed. I mean, that's all I can do. I can just look at it, and I did that successfully, so now maybe I can delve right into it. It's like, no. Don't play a game with yourself. If you establish a contract, keep it. The deal is, this week, you open the front page of that catastrophic monstrosity of a stack of files. And that's good enough. And you give yourself a pat on the back for doing it. And the person will come back and hopefully they'll say, you know, I was able to look at that. I was able to look at the file. And I felt a little bit better about being in that room. So it's like, okay, well, this week, you know, try reading the first page. You know, and the positive consequence of that, you realize this quite quickly, and this is, I'll repeat what I said earlier, it's very hard to humiliate yourself enough so that you can take a step forward, because you have to contend with who you actually are. And that's very painful, especially if you're dealing with that part of you that's quite weak, which is where you're most likely to procrastinate. But if you are willing to lower yourself to that point, you'll find a point of progress, and then the progression will move forward exponentially. So it doesn't matter that much where you start, but it really matters that you start. So, and it's a consequence of the utility of exposure, right? If you can identify what you're avoiding, and you can voluntarily confront it, you can make yourself brave enough to take it on. And that's a universal truth of redemption. That's a good way of thinking about it. So that's a very optimistic thing to know.